Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, listeners. Another beautiful Saturday morning, and welcome to the second segment of the Lou Brydges Show. I want to thank everyone for the positive feedback about the first show. I had no idea how many people were going to. I did know that this is affecting a lot of people, and so far things are going everywhere, going very well. The purpose of this show for you first timers is to get the truth out. The transcendent power of the truth will set us all free. And there's a lot of myths that need to be disabused and a lot of truths that need to be spread about the foreclosure crisis, the causes and effects, and the ongoing crime spree being perpetrated by the major banks of our country that services the mortgages. And as we start out every show, we're going to refer back to one of our founding fathers who saw this all coming, as he saw so much. And Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1802, words that can be applied very much today. And in 1802, Thomas Jefferson said, in light of the current financial crisis, I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all their property until our children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Well, that certainly is what appears to be happening today. And if you've been following the news, boy, what a last couple of weeks it was. Two big banks face suits in mortgage-backed abuses. Eric Schneiderman, the New York Attorney General, is filing a lawsuit against the banks for violating the $26 billion settlement they entered into just last year, as a result of the abuses in the foreclosure process. Abuses in the foreclosure process, let's call things, because this is a show about the truth, let's call it what it is. Frauds upon the courts of our land. Fraudulently taking people's property based on fabricated documents, robo-signed documents, forged documents, false allegations in court. And for those of you who have followed the foreclosure situation and know about a little bit about securitization, you'll know that these banks are the servicers of the mortgage. They do not own the mortgage, and they're making billions of dollars servicing mortgages in foreclosure because the fees they charge for servicing mortgage and foreclosures for the true owners are about 30 times what they charge for the servicing of a performing note and mortgage. So that is why they've been sabotaging all the efforts at modification and everything else. And again, they paid $26 billion and agreed to stop it. And boom, it's just like $26 billion. It's just like, it's analogous, these fines. It sounds so astronomical. But when you analyze the numbers that involve, a lot of these seemingly large fines are like, they're analogous to catching someone for robbing a bank of $100,000 and giving them a $100 fine. Boy, I'll bet he sure won't do that again. So anyway, Eric Schneiderman has filed this suit against violations. We've got the testimony in Congress. The chairman or representative, a high-level representative of the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, which is supposed to be the government agency that we, the people, through our congressional representatives, set up to regulate the banks, refusing to answer a question from the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee about what exactly was found in these so-called independent foreclosure reviews that led the banks to agree to pay another $12 billion over, again, abuses in the foreclosure process, which we know what that really means. And the Office of Comptroller of the Currency refused to turn this information over to our representative, the representative of the people, claiming proprietary privilege. Now, for those of you who don't know the background, the Office of Comptroller of the Currency 2 years ago entered into a consent decree with the banks. Now, what was happening 2 years ago is there were so many complaints from lawyers like myself around the country and judges and everything else that these banks were just falsely foreclosing on people. There was robo-signing in the fabricated documents, and there was sometimes there'd be substitution of parties 4 times in these foreclosures because the banks that are servicing the mortgages didn't really care about who owned them. They were just foreclosing and keeping all the money. And so the 49 state attorney generals are conducting an investigation, and the banks object to that, saying, hey, we're a national association. We're controlled by the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. The Attorney General said, well, that may be well and good, but if you're doing business in our state and you're perpetrating frauds upon the courts of our state, we damn well are going to investigate you, and they did. So the banks ran off to the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, and all of a sudden there's this consent decree. I mean, who knew? OCC is the Office of Comptroller of the Currency. They weren't conducting an investigation or anything. But anyway, the consent decree was that the banks were going to conduct an independent foreclosure review of the 1.5 million foreclosures they had accomplished in 2009 and 2010. Well, 2 years later, after having completed 250,000 using their own in-house, auditing firms, and the whole methodology and the whole cherry picking of the ones they reviewed was obviously, was a blatant attempt to whitewash the whole thing. Nevertheless, lo and behold, they were finding, depending on the servicing bank, between 30 and 80% of the foreclosures they had accomplished that were reviewed were based on frauds upon the court. So they go back to OCC and they enter into another settlement agreement where they're going to pay $12 billion and they're not going to have to conduct the remaining 1.25 million foreclosures or independent reviews. So head of Senator Elizabeth Warren, member of the Senate Banking Committee, calls OCC chairman in or high-level representative and says, what exactly was found in these independent foreclosure reviews? And he declined to answer her question based on a proprietary privilege. Now, let's stop and think about that for a minute. You've got this one branch of the government that was set up by Congress to regulate the banks and allowed the banks to conduct the independent foreclosure review, asserting a privilege on behalf of the banks, information that they have, that OCC has, but won't turn over to us, the representative of the people. Our own government won't turn over the information about the regulatory process. And because this is damning, I mean, this is blatant and not accidental frauds upon the court, not accidental robo-signing, not accidental forgery of documents, but blatant frauds in the courts across our land. And he's asserting, in proprietary privilege, I know of an attorney-client privilege. I know of a doctor-patient privilege. But the only proprietary privilege I know are things like, the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken is a proprietary privilege of Kentucky Fried Chicken. They don't have to tell everybody what the recipe is. This is evidence that you found, and we allowed you to conduct an independent, use your own reviewers. It's evidence of crimes. There is no privilege to disclose your methodology for committing a crime. It's not like the recipe for Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's a crime spree. And the senator, my representative, wants to know what you found. And you damn well better turn it over. And he will turn it over. But it shows you. You see, the lies keep piling up. And they reveal the truth. Every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up. And every one of those 3 more. And pretty soon the whole thing collapses of its weight. And that's what's happening, and these are exciting times. And what this means for homeowners is if you just hold on, there is help on the way. The cavalry is coming because this is a growing movement. These banks are going to be forced to service these loans in a manner that is beneficial for the owner of the mortgage, which means restructuring, reduction of principal balance, forgiveness of past arrearage, and keep people in their home, in the neighborhoods, their children in the schools, and with a fair mortgage based on the true fair market value of the property. And that's what I started out to trying to accomplish 4 years ago. actually 5 years ago now. And after all these years of fighting and uphill battle, but keeping the faith that the truth will eventually surface and will prevail. That's why it is the transcendent power. It is invincible because it is the light. It is the force, and its opposition lies just will bury themselves with their own weight. So we're going to take a break now, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about what this means for the future prospects for homeowners, and some other developments that have come out. But we've got a break now for news and weather. Please stick with us. We've got some really interesting stuff, some real bombshells in the next segments. So this is the Lou Brydges Show. I want to thank my producer here, Debbie Schreiner, and my sidekick, Mike Main, who once in a while I let get in a word or two, but so far...
Oh, Chicagoland.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll see you again. Stay in, viewers. This is the Lou Brydges Show. We'll look forward to talking and telling you in the coming segments.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. I just had a little discussion with my producer about the music. I had picked all the music because the music is all relevant to the topics we're talking about, except for that last tune. It had nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's a decent tune, but the music all has part of the message that we're conveying. That's why I made... Okay, well, anyway, the listeners aren't interested in that, or maybe they are. Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show. We were talking about... I didn't even get to cover all the developments last week. Regulators push to open up about the foreclosure review process. Blame abounds for flawed foreclosure review. Review of botched for U.S. foreclosures beset by missteps. Government Accounting Office said $2 billion they spent on these independent foreclosure reviews. But, when you're cherry picking the ones you're going to review and you don't give, these reviewers were not lawyers. I mean, they were just, they were numbers crunchers. And so how they would be qualified to analyze the legal abuses is, somewhat of a mystery. But again, they are independent auditing firms, and so they do have to, even though they're getting billions of dollars in fees, they do have to tell the truth at some point. And they said, with our methodology, we found between 30 and 80%, which if you extrapolate those numbers and they make it an average of 50%, and they only did 250,000 of the 1.5 million they were supposed to do, and 50% is going to be a woefully low estimate. You're talking about 750,000 American families that were wrongfully dispossessed of their home based on fraud upon the court perpetrated by the 12 major banks servicing mortgages in this country. And the thing is that the courts are now starting to wake up to this. And the judges are starting to look at this because for so long there was this notion that, it's a note, it's a mortgage, the people didn't pay, they got in over their heads, they're going to lose their house. But there's so much, the truth is sometimes concealed by the lies, eventually will come to the surface. And I want to talk about this notion that the homeowners of this country were to blame. That somehow 40 million American homeowners were responsible for the housing bubble. 40 million American homeowners woke up one morning between 1998 and 2008 and said, I'm going to go out and commit bank fraud today. And the banks were the victims of 40 million homeowners. Let me tell you something. I've reviewed over 1,000 home loans. I've seen a number of times these applications that were so-called liar loans. The homeowner has given their pay stubs, their tax returns, and the application is filled out by the originator. Now, the originator is going to get from the banks, from the investment banks, the Wall Street investment banks that are bundling and packaging the mortgage-backed securities, they're going to get a commission based on the size of the mortgage. That's why they go out and they get an appraisal that is not conducted in accordance with the federal regulations and overappraises the value of the property. And that's why they overstate the value of the income. I have seen 100 in which the homeowner's tax returns and pay stubs and everything showed $80,000 in income, and yet the application shows 180. Somebody slipped in a 1. And you know darn well, yes, the homeowner signed the application, but they signed it at the closing, which, by the way, is a violation of federal regulations. They're supposed to be given the completed application 3 days ahead of time. But they never are. And any one of you who's ever closed on a home, you know darn well you were given 50 documents to sign. At the closing, sign, boom, 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 boom. You didn't even, look at them. And those numbers got slipped in. It was done by the originators. And the originators aren't the one that was perpetrating the scheme. They were getting a huge commission. I'm not saying every loan was like that, but so often the originators were coming up with things like, we'll give you 0% so you can afford this house now. And the homeowner would say, well, what happens in 2 years when the interest rate kicks in? Don't worry. We'll get you another 0% mortgage. Houses are going up 10, 12% a year. Your house will increase in value by 20% in those 2 years, and you'll walk out of the closing with cash in your pocket. I mean, there was a guy on the radio in Chicago who used to say something like it was as easy as dirt. I've flipped people 4 or 5 times. Well, these originators were making tremendous commissions for producing these mortgages. And it's unlawful to promise someone you can get them another 0% interest rate in 2 years, because you can't promise that. It's dependent on the continuing Ponzi scheme. And I've explained the Ponzi scheme in other shows. The more real estate goes up, the more attractive mortgage-backed securities become. The more investor money comes into mortgage-backed securities, and the more real estate goes up. It's just like Bernie Madoff. He keeps paying huge dividends because he's paying, keeps getting more and more investors because he's paying huge returns. He's paying the huge returns from the more and more investors. But eventually, all Ponzi schemes will fall apart. They're like a pyramid scheme. And in Wall Street, when you can see the future, you can really make money. And that's what happened. The credit default swaps, the derivatives, are essentially a bet that the Ponzi scheme will eventually fail. Which is Michael Lewis, which I actually, as I pointed out, is like betting on the sun rising in the east tomorrow. And the Wall Street investment firms that were putting together these mortgage-backed securities were buying 10 and 12 credit default swaps on the same the pool of 2,500 mortgages, betting that what they had put together, sold to investors, made a huge commission on, $5 million to $7.5 million, doing 3 or 4 of those a day. They're betting that they're going to fail. And they're buying the bets from Lehman Brothers and AIG. Lehman Brothers has to pay off so much they're forced to go bankrupt. AIG is about to go next. And AIG, though, was too big to fail because they insure most of the shipping and aviation in the world. And if they fail, a lot of those ships and planes can't sail and fly, which means we were on the precipice of global famine of a biblical scale. But the thing is that the notion needs to be disabused that this was not caused by homeowners. There were a few people taking advantage of the system. There were a few housewives that were out there, all of a sudden real estate gurus are flipping homes left and right and everything. But that's to be expected, and that is actually encouraged because, it perpetrates the notion that your house is something to make money on. And that, if housewives are out there making money flipping houses, well then you need to, you can buy this house. But the thing is, it's not a $300,000 house. It was a $200,000 or $150,000 house. And if the mortgage was $150,000 or $200,000, what the house is truly worth, what it has always been worth, the true value, then the homeowner can stay in. So homeowners are being evicted because they were the victims of a Ponzi scheme that overstated the value of the property that was perpetrated by the investment banks that were bundling and packaging the mortgages. The originators who were making commissions from the investment banks were by getting more and more mortgages, and the appraisers who are they're getting business because they're appraising the property at whatever is necessary to get the mortgage for as much as possible. And pretty soon the appraisals become a self-perpetuating myth. But and the banks that are now servicing the mortgages, they know the trust that's set up to own the mortgage is going to be the servicing agreement is with one of the 12 major banks. Excuse me, I had to cough. So they're going to make more money servicing mortgages in foreclosure. The victim was the American people. This whole Ponzi scheme created, by some estimates, $3.5 to $4.5 trillion that didn't really exist. It's the illusion. It created the illusion of $3.5 trillion of capital that was bundled and packaged into the mortgage-backed securities, MBS, sold to investors, and they all made their money. And the investors didn't lose because they got the credit default swap also that guaranteed, which raises the question, has there really been a default on the note? And the securitization involving the transfer of the mortgages was they bypassed all the recorders' offices. And, we do have, we've had since 1500, something called the Statute of Frauds, which every state has codified by what we call in Illinois the Conveyances Act. This is getting a little too technical for this type of show. You can go to our website, which is
FightIllinoisForeclosures.com.
It's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. There's a more detailed explanation. I want to give credit to some of the people that have discovered this and some of the forefathers. The father of foreclosure defense attorneys, Neil Garfeld, Jeff Barnes, Max Gardner, Professor Adam Levitin at Georgetown University, who has emerged as the leading academic authority on the causes of the foreclosure crisis and the abuses and the frauds upon the courts of our land. And Professor Adam Levitin, in particular, has written some very technical, detailed stuff that the judges of our country need to start reading. Because I don't want to go too much about, I'm a practicing lawyer, so I can't really talk too much about the judges. But there are judges who are now starting to get it. And there are going to be, throughout in this whole story, when the history is written, heroes and villains. There's going to be heroes where we're going to be studying in the law school buildings that are named after them, the cases decided by those judges who sacrificed justice on the altar of expediency. That's all I'm going to say on that subject. We got a break now. We're going to be back in about 5 minutes for another segment of the Lou Brydges Show.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O and Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Hello, this is Lou Brydges again, back with the Lou Brydges Show. Mike Main, my sidekick here. I wasn't able to cover all the news of the past couple of weeks. Bank of America to start reducing principal for homeowners. Foreclosures drop in Illinois, but Illinois still ranks third in the nation, and that's not going to change for a while. I mean, there are still, by some estimates, as many as 20 million American families that are underwater. Now, for those of you who don't know what underwater means, when you owe more on a mortgage than the property is worth. I'm going to give you a quick illustration. If you owe more on the property, on a mortgage than the property is worth, you're in a very bad situation. Every month you're paying a lot more for that house than you really should. Very rough rule of thumb is that over 30 years you pay 3 times the amount of a mortgage. So if you're $100,000 underwater, you're overpaying by $300,000, which over 360 payments is about almost $1,000 a month. But the big thing is you're paying the taxes on a property that you have no ownership interest in, and you're about 25 years away from owning a dollar of it. And the reason you're underwater isn't because of some unfortunate downturn of the market, is because there was an artificial bubble created by those who were selling mortgage-backed securities. There's 2,500 mortgages at $200,000. I've gone through that. It's $500 million, and 2,500 mortgages at $300,000 is $750 million. The 1% commission alone is an additional $2.5 million. Homeowners are facing distress or underwater or stuck, thinking they're stuck in even if they're current, but stuck in paying this $1,000 plus the taxes more than they should. Have applied for modification but haven't gotten anywhere, but just giving the runaround. There are options to relieve their distress. There are a number of options, and we go into them on our website, but there's strategic default. You can contest a foreclosure. You can demand that they produce documents that they aren't able to produce. You can file counterclaims. You can apply for and pursue a loan restructuring, a modification with a reduction of principal balance. We have investors that will buy your property at a short sale and then lease it back to you. If you want to move out, you can have an investor buy your property and just stay into it until it sells at a fair market value. And because the banks will often, sell to a short sale for less than the property is worth. There are counterclaims based on the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act, and the Consumer Fraud Act. What we needed is an independent foreclosure review of everything associated with the application, of the origination of the loan and the securitization by a qualified mortgage industry specialist. He then would give the attorney the evidence, the ammunition with which he can represent you effectively and demand that you be given a fair deal if you were, as you probably were, taken advantage of. It requires that you have an attorney who understands the use of what are called audits, and that's really kind of a bad name for them. They're investigations into all the circumstances and documents of the origination of the loan, the application, the processing of the application, the closing and the servicing of the loan. And the securitization, which involves a detailed examination of SEC filings to find out who actually owns your mortgage. Because I'm going to let you in on something. The actual owner of the note and mortgage, of your note and mortgage, would much rather restructure the mortgage to continue it to be a performing mortgage than to have you default because you're underwater. And the owner of the note and mortgage it would much rather negotiate a settlement with you if you are in default and you're facing foreclosure. It's the servicing banks that are getting in the way because they're breaching a fiduciary duty they owe to the owners of the mortgage, the trust, or the United States government, if it's a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgage, by just pursuing foreclosure. Well, the reason they do that is with a major bank that services the most mortgages, I don't can't mention their name on the air, but think of an old Western stagecoach. They service 7 million mortgages. If the servicing mortgages, if the performing mortgages, if 7 million are performing, they get about $10 per month for a performing mortgage. That's $70 million a month. It's a nice little chunk of change for opening the envelopes and processing a check, but that's what they do. They're a bank. They charge about $300 a month for mortgages in foreclosure, which means if 1 million of those 7 million are in foreclosure, they're making $300 million on those alone and $60 million on the other 6 million. $360 million versus $70 million is, that's $3.5 billion per year more in revenue. That's why the HAMP program was an abject failure. That's why all the modification programs that come out are failures. That's why, you've been given the runaround, and so many people have been given the runaround and the modifications while at the same time the bank's foreclosing. I have had over 100 people come in and say, I don't have to worry about this foreclosure because I'll be getting a modification. Or, all of a sudden I get a notice that the sheriff is selling my property. I was told by the bank, the people I was dealing with, that I didn't have to worry about this foreclosure lawsuit because I was getting a loan modification. They were sandbagging you. These are not good people. These are evil people. These are the modern day mafia. These are exactly what Thomas Jefferson warned. The major banks in this country are perpetrating a crime spree. And there's been the largest the last 10 years has been the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And it's been from the bulk of American people to a 1/1000th of a percent of the upper elite. $3.5 trillion transferred to them. This is not America. You got to stand up and fight back. This is the Lou Brydges Show. We're going to take a break now. We'll be back in a few minutes. We'll go into more about how you can fight back. But remember, never give up the land.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Good morning. This is Lou Brydges again on the Lou Brydges Show with Mike Main and my producer, Debbie Schreiner. The greatest financial crime in history. It was the greatest financial crime spree in history, but it's perhaps being exceeded by what's going on now by the servicing banks. And again, people need to understand that banks don't loan their own money. Banks service mortgages, service loans. They have low money is either depositors' money in the case of commercial loans, or in the case of mortgage loans, it's the investors in the mortgage-backed securities. And the banks that service these mortgages are interfering with the intelligent, proper thing to do, which would be to restructure the mortgages to reflect the true fair market value of the property. Because if you do that, you don't have major defaults. Now, that's what about half the mortgages are roughly half are Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, are owned by the government, and the other half are privately owned by private trusts, that are investors in mortgage-backed securities, typically public employee retirement funds. And it's really a beautiful concept that people who are working now are saving their money for retirement, and their money is being invested in mortgages, which are provided to people building homes and raising families and It's a beautiful Norman Rockwell thing, but there are evil people who will take advantage of this. And that's what's going to bring us down if we don't stand up and do something about it. You know, the Thomas Jefferson prophecy was said, if we allow the banks to take over. It was a warning. It wasn't saying that this is inevitable, and it's not inevitable. And because there will always be evil people that will take advantage of things. And the people, you divide, there's evil people and there's good people. And that's a continuous struggle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. It's a struggle that we go about internally every day within ourselves. Do the right thing or do the expedient, the thing that benefits us. And there are people that very talented, intelligent, educated, blessed people who spend all their blessings and fortune and good education and all their abilities to take advantage of those. And those people have gravitated to Wall Street, and they're taking advantage, and they have perpetrated the greatest transfer of wealth in human history to a very, very small percentage of people. And which is what Thomas Jefferson said would happen if you allow it. But there's also a saying that countries don't fail because of bad people. Countries fail when good people do nothing. And for the good people of this country, the homeowners that are just trying to raise their families and keep their communities up and keep their kids in a good school and within the communities and involved in all their community affairs and just, keep the family together, and you're underwater or you're facing foreclosure or you've had you've been laid off because obviously the construction industry was destroyed by this downturn. And so there's so many of our clients are construction industry clients that were making a good living a few years ago and now are just scraping along trying to do whatever they can, keep their family in the home. Do that. You'll be stronger for doing it. Do not just give up the land. You have rights, and this is America. And if you stand up and, if you're in foreclosure, you're not alone. And if you fight for truth and justice, you'll never be alone, and not in this country, because there'll be others who will stand up alongside of you. There are options that you can pursue. You can contest the former mortgage, the foreclosure action, and at the same time, we have a whole system of applying for modifications that include restructuring. And when we have the investigative reviews that give us the evidence of the fraud that was committed in the origination of the loan, the frauds that are being committed in the foreclosure, and the weaknesses, the failed securitization, there's 50 defenses that we can raise. And I'm not saying don't hire us if you think you're going to get your home free and clear of a mortgage. There are people who will, but don't go into it. That's not right either. You should be paying something. You should be paying you should be paying a mortgage based on the true fair market value of the property. And if you and you've got just $5,000 or $10,000 in equity in the property, the owner of the mortgage is much better off, because if you've got $10,000 of equity in the property, you're going to be damn sure you make that mortgage payment. And that's going to be a performing note and mortgage for the life, which is in the investor's better interest. In foreclosure, the investor's never going to realize anywhere near the true fair market value of the property. They're going to have all the fees associated with foreclosure, the attorney's fees, the servicer's fees. They're going to have to pay the taxes during the process, and then they're going to have to pay a real estate broker to list the property, and then they're going to be selling a vacant property that's probably been stripped of the washer, dryer, refrigerator, stove, dishwasher, electric garage door opener, and everything else. Nationwide, the statistics are that the owner of the mortgage realizes 45 to 55 cents on the dollar of the fair market value of the property. If they restructure the mortgage, they've got to note a mortgage for 100% or 90% of the fair market value of the property. And the note and mortgage of $150,000 secured by a house worth $160,000 or $170,000 is worth $150,000 in today's dollar. So from the owner of the mortgage's perspective, it's 45 to 55% 3-4 years from now when they sell the property, or it's at 95% of fair market or 90 or 95% of fair market value today. But the banks that service the mortgages have been interfering with this. But that is changing. The worm is turning, and these are historical times. So join the millions of Americans that are fighting to keep their homes. Do not give up the land. Fight for truth and justice. You do that, and you'll never be alone. All right, we're going to have one more break and come back for a closing segment. And this is the Lou Brydges Show. I want to thank again the founders of the foreclosure defense movement, those who started speaking the truth. Neil Garfeld, the father of foreclosure defense attorneys, Jeff Barnes, Max Gardner, and of course Professor Adam Levitin at Georgetown University, the leading academic authority on legal issues involving foreclosure. You judges out there, start reading Professor Adam Levitin. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Hello, this is Lou Brydges again. This is the final segment of our show, and we've been, I've been trying to continue to spread the truth, because that's the reason we took on this show, was to, we believe that the truth is a transcendent force, a power that is invincible, and I feel that if we spread the truth, that all the lies and deceit that's going on will eventually fall, and we will have done our job. And if more people start doing this, and more people start becoming informed about the truth, the thing is that the truth is called transcendent because it is invincible. So powerful that sometimes it doesn't even need to, it's a sword that doesn't even need to be taken from its sheath, because the lies, every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up, and every one of those 3 more. And that's what we're seeing today, is that the lies are so piling on. J.P. Morgan Chase beset by regulatory review from all corners. Eric Schneiderman filing this lawsuit against the banks, and the class actions being brought against the mortgage servicing banks, and now their investors that they service the mortgages for are suing them for breach of fiduciary duty. And we have the whistleblowers. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we had 2 whistleblowers come out talking about warehouses, Bank of America, Wells Fargo warehouses, where they send, if there's a problem with the documents that they're sending for foreclosure, they send it to the warehouse, and it comes back, magically the next day with all the documents signed and sealed. And then one whistleblower talking about they sign 10,000 documents a month. Never looked, that's 1 every second or something that you work in a month. Never looking at any of them. The abuses and the notarizations. And these aren't just technicalities. We can never sacrifice the truth on the altar of expediency. Every one of these cases is going to have to be examined and a resolution reached based on a fair assessment of the facts and the evidence. And you're not going to clear your dockets of foreclosure cases by sacrificing justice on the altar of expediency. Whenever you start administering justice on anything other than the truth, and the truth alone, then you're doomed. Because you're compromising, and you can't do that. So, again, there's a lot going on. These are very exciting times. These are historical times. And if you're in foreclosure, facing foreclosure, if you're underwater and current on your mortgage, I can encourage you to see an attorney who's knowledgeable in the field. Now, in future shows, we're going to talk about what to look for in hiring a foreclosure defense attorney. And how to go about the process. And unfortunately, a lot of I love the HUD agencies that are trying to do help, and the homeowners assistance and the NACAs and all that, but this is very complicated, the whole securitization, and because if you can raise deficiencies in the mortgage origination and the securitization, and then you can show how you were defrauded, you can show how your client was defrauded and misled and the victim of this crime, then you're in a position where you can demand a fair resolution. This is the Lou Brydges Show. Tune in next Saturday at 8 a.m., where hopefully we're going to get a little more experienced about this, and it'll go a little smoother, but never give up the land.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. Or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for The Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.